really grateful for this Sunday morning that we're able to gather today and participate in this service. And as as our pastor was praying today, that we may take something from it and carry it out, to be able to use it outside of this church, to not have it be knowledge that then makes people arrogant, but be a seed that then plants in our heart and then grows and produces fruit. And today I would like to talk about a topic that I think is incredibly simple, but does get overcomplicated through time and through people trying to re-explain it into, try to educate people in their own ways, and that's redemption. I'd like to talk about that part of the Bible, the overarching arc of what God has been doing from beginning till today, and what the end goal of it all is. The word redeemer or redemption is basically a word that means to exchange something for another, so that you may have something and purchase it, and thus grabbing the other thing. It is incredibly important to understand that redeeming in today's language means a little bit of a different thing. It means you have a ticket. Somebody might have given it to you for free, or you might have won it somewhere or something else, and you take it to the person that has the prize. You give them the ticket and you get the prize for it. When the Bible is talking about redeeming in the biblical sense, it is talking about, in the Russian Bible, it mentions the word purchase. It says bought out. It means that when someone spends something to acquire this other thing, it isn't given to them for free. It isn't something that they are gifted. It isn't something that they have won somewhere through some contest or some easy thing. It is something that they have gained and then spend that which they have gained to purchase this other thing. Which becomes an interesting storyline, because as you start reading in the Bible and you start going to the very beginning, to the very foundations of the universe, both the spiritual world and the physical world, it becomes more and more prevalent as to how God has built this and how God is looking to bring this forward and bring about the resolution for whatever problems we're dealing with. In this particular instance, condemnation or death, because the Bible mentions that the wages of sin is death. It isn't the price that a whole lot of people would be willing to pay. And it isn't a price that a whole lot of laws would accept if only people paid it. Because there's a whole set of rules and laws and regulations that require a certain price to be paid for the salvation of people. I would like to read the first spot. It will be in the book of Job, chapter 19, verse 25. For I know that my Redeemer lives, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. This is a prophecy through Job. It is a moment of revelation, both, I believe, to him and to those that are listening to him at the moment, because this is prior to Jesus coming. This is prior to many of the prophecies of him. But it is something that through his suffering he has acquired him and was able to speak out. And the point of it being is that my Redeemer lives. My Redeemer exists. My Redeemer is now. And I believe what will happen and hasn't happened yet, that he will stand upon the earth. This is talking about Jesus Christ. In another verse I'd like to read, this is Apostle Paul. He's speaking about a certain situation that we have all found ourselves in. And this is in Romans chapter 7, verse 14. I've heard this spot a couple of sermons ago, and a question arose in my mind. The spot reads like this. For we know that the law is spiritual, but I am carnal, sold under sin. And the important piece here is that I would like to focus on, or zone in a little bit, is to sold under sin. There was a transaction. A transaction happened at a certain point in time where man was not under sin, and then man was sold to sin. And now there's this overarching story of purchasing him back. Purchasing him back and buying him back from this sin. So I sat there as I was listening to this verse, and a question popped into my mind, and I asked it, Paul, who sold you? Who sold you to sin? And And I started thinking back, and I started going through time and through Bible, and I started thinking about it, and what happens is, I heard this answer in my heart, and it said, my mother Eve sold me. She didn't know. She sold me. And the terrible part about it is that my father Adam didn't stop her. It happened. We were sold to sin. Through trickery, through deceit, through all these circumstances that happened, we were sold to sin. Unbeknownst to us, unbeknownst to our forefathers and our mother, we were sold to sin. And so Apostle Paul here says, the law that God gave is spiritual, but I am carnal because I'm sold to sin. So this paints a picture of a need of a redeemer, of a need of a redemption or a purchase back. So what happens is, as we think about it, when God was making the universe, when He was creating the universe, there was a spiritual world, and in the spiritual world He created angels, spirits of service, and the chief amongst them was Lucifer, was Satan. God created him so incredible, so magnificent, so marvelous, that in the Russian Bible it says that he was created in a way that would inspire God to keep creating, to keep making more beautiful things, to keep making incredible, amazing things in the world. So what happens to Satan is he becomes very envious of God, of His power, of His glory, and he says, I am incredible as well. So I will make myself equal to Him, and I will bring my seat next to the seat of the Almighty, and I and Him will be even. To which God, of course, said, no, because you're not. You are a creation. You have been created. I am a creator. I am ultimately will always be higher, better, smarter, and powerful than you, because I have made you. So there's a war that happens in the spiritual world, and Satan and his angels are cast down. God then creates a physical world in which He puts man and his wife, and He gives them this beautiful universe to be parts of, to be rulers of, and He gives them the ability to feel, He gives them the ability to enjoy, to create like He creates, as well as procreate, meaning create life on this planet. He gives them that ability, and He actually gives them a mission and says, go forth and multiply. And I firmly believe that God doesn't do anything without a purpose in it. And so, in my mind, the way I understand it, that when God said, Adam, Eve, have children, raise them up, and they may have children. The purpose of it was to allow us, human beings, to understand God better. To understand what it is to be a father, what it is to be a mother, what it is to create, to see life that you've made to grow up. To have that life then be in front of you and come to you for a solution of problems. For that life to be growing up depending on you, strictly on you, to be successful, to live, to keep continuing to prosper in this life. And when you think about it, as a parent, I myself, and I know that my parents, something changes in you when the child is born. Something is very different about that event. There are many children in the world, but your child is very different than the rest of them. And there's no comparison that anybody can bring up that someone else's child is better than yours. Your child is your child. And he or she are the greatest thing that has ever happened in your life. No matter what the faults or the consequences of their actions are, they're your children. God is imparting this knowledge upon Adam and Eve, and it tells them, these children, they're going to be grown up and they're going to need you to show them who I am, to tell them who I am and what I do and how I live, and how I would like them to live. And the other part to that is, I think really important, is that children have a tendency to make mistakes quickly and often. And they tend to get into trouble. And then when they get into trouble, whatever the problem is, however small it may be in your eyes as a parent, in their eyes, it is the end of the world. It is the worst thing. Imagine a situation, and this is probably very basic. Your child has an ice cream cone. An ice cream falls out of a cone on the ground, right? Your child is 3 years old. To them, this is the most excruciating and agonizing thing that has ever happened. It is the thing they love. It is no longer available to them. They have lost it. They're suffering loss at this point. And in their mind, there's nobody else that can solve it but their parent. And so they go to their parent and they start crying and they start saying and they start explaining. And God gives parents this ability to be like Him in that moment and to say, listen, this is big, I understand. It is bothering you, it is so hurtful, but I am your dad, and I can fix it. And so God gives this ability to parents to understand what it is when a child comes to them with a problem that's really teeny, comparably to what the parents are dealing with, but incredibly large in the child's life. And for a parent to step in and say, you know what, your problem may be bigger than you, but it isn't bigger than me, and I can solve it. I can provide a resolution. I will buy you a new one. I will buy you better. I'll buy you bigger. Same thing happens when we come to God. Same thing happens when we start reaching out to Him and when our heart is broken over something. There are many situations in my life where I stood in awe of how absolutely careless people can be sometimes towards another heart. You know, there was a moment when I came to God and I prayed and I cried, and I remember I was telling Him, Lord, I don't know why this is happening to me. But once again, my friends have left me. They have betrayed me, and I'm alone again. And because God doesn't do anything without a purpose, His whole path through life, when He was on this earth and up to the cross, He replies with, you know what? I know what that feels like. Mine have to. One of them betrayed me. Because of him, I ended up on the cross. And I understand what it feels like to be betrayed. And I understand what it feels like to be abandoned. I get it. But as your Father, I can fix it. I am God. And so then it becomes this thing where Job is looking at his situation, and it is an impossible situation. His body is falling apart. His family has left him. His friends are accosting him with all these incredibly intelligent ideas and smart righteousness that they have imparted upon him, that he is wrong before God, that he should repent, and that he should do this and that, and all these things are happening. And in his suffering, the only thing he can think of and say, I know my Redeemer lives. Hallelujah. And so it then becomes this lesson that we learn through life. God had a plan from the beginning. When His children, when His creation was stolen from Him, was misled into slavery of sin, was sold, God realized that there needs to be a plan of redemption. There needs to be a plan of purchase, because there was a ransom note that said, the wages of sin is death. Someone has to pay for this. And I will not give him back to you until the price is paid. Because God is almighty and all-powerful, He could just solve it. With His might and His power, He could overrule every law and everything out there in the world, in the universe. He doesn't do that. Because He cannot disobey His own righteousness. He created these laws. He created these things. So now He has to operate within those laws. God doesn't break His own commandments. He doesn't set forth something and then breaks it on His own. He doesn't do those things. He's God. So then God puts a plan for it. And He preaches this plan through prophets, through His men, through His psalms, singers, poets, through people to the end of times. He's singing these prophecies about the coming of a Redeemer. The coming of a Redeemer that will stand upon the earth. He goes into so much detail that in Isaiah it describes almost minute by minute what is going to happen to Jesus Christ. Isaiah goes into so much detail that when you see the description of what happened to Jesus, you're in awe. How is this possible? Knowing this, you have committed this sin anyways. It is possible because we're sold unto sin. We're sold unto sin, into slavery. Apostle Paul, in Romans, chapter 8, verse 12 through 15, he says this: Therefore, brethren, we're debtors not to the flesh, to live after the flesh. For if you live after the flesh, you shall die. But if you through the Spirit do mortify the deeds of the body, you shall live. For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, they are sons of God. For ye have not received the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you have received the spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father. God then speaks this thought through Apostle Paul, and it says, there was a transaction, and my people were led away. They were stolen. They were deceived. I now have a plan of redemption, a plan to purchase them back, to buy them back, to pay the ransom that is necessary. And He does all these things so that when we're in Him, that when we're finding Him, that this redemption, it doesn't just happen one time. It isn't I'm redeemed today and then I have no strength to go on. That's what the law did. The law of Moses proposed a solution. And Apostle Paul speaks about it and says, the law of Moses said, do not do these things, do not obey the law of sin, be holy unto God. It says the problem is that I am carnal and I am sold to sin. And the problem is that whether I want to or not, my body demands that I do these things. And there are days I win and then there are days I lose. And here he says, because of Christ, because of redemption, because of this purchase back, he says, Christ says through Apostle Paul that you are no longer slaves to it. You don't have to owe it anything. I think it is important to understand that there's a thought I heard once, and it said this, that Christianity, that the person I was talking to said, the reason I'm not a Christian is because to me it feels like Christianity is just a set of rules. It's a set of rules, a set of limitations, a set of things that don't do. There's not a whole lot of do's. There's a lot of don't do and don't listen, don't follow, don't do this, don't look at that, don't commit this thing. All these things are bad, and God is waiting there the moment that you slip up to smack you in the back of your head and to tell you, no, I knew you would do this. I knew it. I knew this whole cross thing was a waste of time. I knew this was for nothing. And to me, and I sat there and my heart wrenched. And I remember I couldn't believe that this theft of salvation is happening again. That Satan is again leading people into deception. That he's again confusing them. That he's again telling them that, is it really redemption? Are you really free? Think about it. Think about the rules that he's imposing you. Think about the things that he's making you do. Think about how he waits until you fall, until you slip to punish you. The Bible itself says, there's condemnation for those that sin. There's an eternal suffering. And that's the lie that gets perpetuated in people's hearts. And I'm here to tell you that this is wrong. This isn't true. Redemption isn't about purchasing you back to make your burden heavier. It is the opposite of that. When Israel was in Egypt, God said, Moses, you're going to go there and lead him out because the wailing of my nation have come before my ears, and I have heard it, and I am now here to solve it. And it is the same thing that happens with sin, with this bondage that we are in sin. The wailing of the people of God have come before him, and the time was made perfect, where the Redeemer walked the earth, where the Redeemer was here to propose a solution that is eternal. I would like to make it clear that God does not wait for you to fall. God enables you to walk. He gives you the power, the strength, the agility, the awareness to walk and not to fall. He is waiting for when you do fall to raise you up. He's not there to limit you. He's there to set you free. He's not there to say that don't do this. He's there to say that you don't need to be a slave to that sin anymore. Here's how I will change you. I will no longer let the body, the carnal flesh, control you. I will allow you, I will give you the power to say no to it. You will walk your life not wanting to do these things, not desiring after these things, because I will be in you with my Spirit. The times are changing. And the Pharisees understood this, and it was very difficult for them to comprehend how they fit into this new picture. Because if we read, this is in Matthew chapter 12, there's a situation, there's a very interesting moment that's happening there. Chapter 12, verse 10 through 13. And behold, there was a man which had his hand withered, and they asked him, Jesus, saying, Is it lawful to heal on Sabbath days? That they might accuse him. And he said unto them, What man shall be there among you that shall have one sheep, and if it fall into a pit on Sabbath day, will he not lay hold on it and lift it out? How much then is a man better than a sheep? Wherefore it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days. Then said he to the man, Stretch forth thine hand. And he stretched it forth, and it was restored whole, like as is the other. Pharisees understood that the time of Lot was passing. There was something new coming. Pharisees, being devout practitioners of the law, at least visually or outwardly, they saw this person that was walking around and was doing these things that are contrary to what they've been teaching, contrary to what redemption story they have written for the nation of Israel. And so when they try to trick him and they say, is it good to do good? Silly question. Trick question, really. Because to them it is the importance of Sabbath itself, not doing anything that is more important than helping their human beings that are around them. However, God says, listen, I do nothing without a purpose. And like to Adam and Eve, I try to teach them what it is to be a father and a mother. To you, I teach you what it is to be a caretaker. If your sheep falls into the pit, will you not lift it out? It sounds like an absurd question. It says, so then, if you would, how much more is man? And I have come to save. So it isn't the law of Sabbath to rest on that day. It is the rest that God brings eternal. And so he comes unto earth to explain these things, to explain the fact that I'm not about rules and limitations. I am about freedom. I'm about freeing you. Apostle Paul says in a verse, he says, you are called down to liberty. He says, but make sure that that liberty isn't used by you wastefully, in a way that will be condemnation to you. And so then God proposes these things. And of course Satan tries to steal them away and he tries to confuse the people that are here on this earth. And he says, but if you do this or that, or is there even a God, and all these other things. And it's so important to go back to that first verse that I read today, that Job says, my Redeemer lives. And I need to impart this on you, that when he's saying this isn't out of a place of comfort. This isn't out of a place of safety. This is a place of suffering, of pain. Last Sunday we heard a preacher preach about pilgrimage and being strangers on this earth. And I thought it was incredibly important to understand that example that he brought about being in a different country, for example. And there's a protest going on and people are protesting something. You don't know what it is. Ultimately, you don't care. There's a celebration of some sort, you don't know what it's about, and you don't care. And the only reason you don't care about these things is because soon you're going home. That's where your stuff is. That's where your worries are. That's where your happiness is. This other country means nothing. You're visiting. It is so very much alike to what we're doing here on earth. Whatever it is around us that is happening, it doesn't ultimately matter, because we're going home soon. We're going home to our Redeemer, to Him who purchased us. He purchased us through an incredible amount of suffering. As I mentioned, He had His friends betrayed. He had His friends scattered. At one point it was very interesting that there was a moment when Lazarus was really sick and he was dying. And people sent on to him and they said, come, your friend Lazarus is passing. You might be able to save him. And the Bible mentions that Jesus tarries. He's late. He shows up. And Lazarus is dead. And then these two sisters, they come to him and they go, Lord, if you were here early enough, you could have saved them. And this goes back to that example that I brought up from when we come before God with our problems. Like children come before us and we say, this is impossible to fix. He's dead. How can you fix it? And Jesus says, it may be impossible for you, it's not impossible for me. And once again, as proof of His holiness, of His power and visibility, He raises Lazarus from the dead. Lazarus walks out. And then He goes on to die on the cross. And then He's buried in the grave. And then the stone is laid. And the disciples are walking around and they're distraught and they're lost, because imagine, in your heart, the guy who raised the dead is now in a grave. The guy who healed the lame is no longer moving. The guy whose words you listened to like breath that you needed is no longer breathing. Imagine the despair. Imagine the aloneness, the loneliness, the abandonment. It seems impossible once again. We once again come to a problem that is unsolvable. And on the third day, He rises, cementing our redemption, paying the price, and proving to all once and for all that He's not a God of bondage. He's not a God of slavery. He's not a God of limitation. He's a God that is set about setting His people free. Once again, lead Him out of bondage into salvation. Lead Him out of limitation into power, into glory that He's promised them in heaven. Condemnation was never meant for people. I want that to be understood. Condemnation was meant for Satan and his angels. They knew better. They knew better. It is those that would follow Satan that receive this condemnation. God intended heaven for people. Today, I would like to read one more spot. This is in Luke chapter 4, verse 18-19. This is when Jesus walks into a church of sorts, a synagogue, and He reads this spot out of prophet Isaiah, and He says this: "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because He hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord." This part where it says to set to liberty them that are bruised, in the Russian Bible it says to set free those that are tormented. It is important to understand that God has come with a different purpose. His name, Jesus, means Jehovah saves. He has a new mission. Mission is redemption. Today is not Judgment Day. Today is Day of Salvation. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's pray.